It's Brainwash with Dr. Tom and Guitar Picks with Eric Perrotti. Django Reinhardt, Tears.
Django Reinhardt was a gypsy musician. I think his biggest time period would have been probably, if I'm not mistaken, probably the 1940s or so. And he was a jazz musician, a really great jazz musician that also had a violin player in his group, a guy named Stefan Grappelli. And this was a real interesting thing to hear some of this. I'm actually looking for the sheet music on that because it's not one that I have memorized, but I would play an excerpt of it for you. This is an arrangement that I've done of Tears. And the one arrangement that I've given to you is actually Django playing, and it's a bit faster than the version that I have arranged of Tears. It's even not the most typical Django song, but for some reason I've always loved this tune, and the main riff of it is like this. I just like the minor key of it. It is, in all effect, like all of his music, a jazz tune, and he played many jazz standards, like Ain't Misbehavin'. I said that because I thought about putting that on the list, too. It's not, so I gotta sneak it in there. It's the 21st song. But he did many, traditional pieces that were around that day, the jazz standards, but his originals always had as much jazz elements, as many as they had, of a wandering gypsy, which is what he really was. So I really like his music because also he was this amazing guitar player that had the only use of his index and middle finger of his left hand. He had damaged the other two, I believe, in a fire, but they kind of fused together and they went all the way to the other side of his hand, that he could utilize those to create chords that most people who have four fingers can't play. But when he would play some of the fastest riffs, he would use just these two fingers, and it's fascinating. I encourage anybody who doesn't know that name to get to know Django Reinhardt. But actually, about a month or two ago, there was a Django Reinhardt festival, I believe, in Greenwich Village, and the turnout, they say, was unbelievable. Some of his living relatives, grandkids, I guess, or maybe his son or something. But the guitar players who tend to continue playing guitar, we have a tendency to usually go to things that are more challenging, and one of those things is jazz. And Django was one of the earlier jazz players. A different form of jazz than you would think of if you listen to people who are around today. But this is some of the roots of it, Django Reinhardt, so don't forget that name.
Now, you yourself are able to do some extraordinary things with your fingers. Would you describe for us what they are?
I don't know if they help in my guitar playing at all, but I know that aside from doing an audio, you're videotaping this, so I just do this in the video camera. I can take really any of these fingers, but the real genius is the index finger, primarily of my left.
And in fact, it shook when you just happened to shake your hand.
Well, I can bend them back really far, and if I use the aid of my right hand to grab my left hand finger, I can take the fingertip and bend it all the way around like a half circle and push my fingertip into the back of my hand. and no, it doesn't hurt at all.
It's Brainwash with Dr. Tom and Guitar Picks with Eric Perrotti, guitarist.
That's by Roy Smeck.
Roy Smeck.
Known as the Wizard of the Strings, and he literally was. His recordings, I think, go back to the teens. The one that the guitarist, I think the recording you have is probably from 1931 or so. But his influence on me was not just the guitar. He was an amazing guitar player. Only died a few years ago, and he great guitar player. Also, one of his passions was slide guitar, but more like Hawaiian with a touch of jazz, or jazz with a touch of Hawaiian guitar, and banjo and ukulele. He was really the pioneer of overdubbing, not Les Paul, except we almost never give him the credit for that. He was, although Les Paul's form of overdubbing was eventually one machine could do it all, but Roy Smeck would do it with several machines, with records, to record himself playing something as it's playing back to record something else with it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we're talking back in the 20s. And he even did this with film eventually, himself, playing all the parts, and you could see this. And there are movies that exist where you can find this. But he was an amazing ukulele player. And for those of you who think the uke is just an instrument that you do things like... Well, obviously you can do that. But in his day, it was a pretty serious vaudeville instrument, and he could do some very interesting gymnastics on it. One thing that I've actually got video clips of him doing is right hand tapping on the instrument, which is this. Which is very difficult on a uke, but on a guitar I can actually do that. But this is what everybody thinks Eddie Van Halen invented anyway. But guitar is, a snippet of it that I can play on ukulele is like... There you go, yeah. So yeah, he encouraged me to play the ukulele. Maybe that's not such a good thing. No, I really get a kick out of the uke, and if we have time, you might even hear another uke song because it's the next one on the list.
Yeah. Great segue. All right.
Isn't that neat? Yeah. I planned it that. No, I actually didn't plan it that way. Just how did it work out?
Now you have a collection of ukuleles too, right?
Yeah, I got about 36, I believe.
Where does it stop?
Well, see, the greatest thing about ukuleles, okay, we had a uke room in our home. And when we decided to adopt our daughter, that uke room became her bedroom. And so I had to turn my studio into a lot of slashes. Studio / uke room / library, whatever. But that was when I probably only had about 30 ukes. Now, probably 25, actually. But the great thing about ukuleles, as opposed to maybe guitars, is how they blend in with the woodwork. I could come home with 5 tonight and they could go unnoticed, Especially in a room with 36. Who's counting, right? And they're so tiny. I mean, it's like this is actually a big uke, and it's it's probably all of 24 inches in length, if it's even that much. I doubt it's even that long. I've never actually measured it. But anyway, but I think if you treat them well, I mean, you can get some amazing chords, and I've actually done some. That's Bach, on ukulele, Bachalele.
So, honey, I shrunk my guitar.
That's what I usually tell the students. I say, see, I put it in the dryer again. Came out small, but anyway.
It's Brainwash with Dr. Tom and Guitar Picks with Eric Perrotti. Irving Berlin, Blue Skies.
The influence there, Blue Skies, written by Irving Berlin, who I just love Irving Berlin. For those of you who don't know, he wrote things like Easter Parade and White Christmas and all that. But I like Blue Skies in particular because the recording I have that I'm telling you about is by Les Paul, who is the guy whose name appears on many guitars, who is still to this day one of the most fascinating guitar players, an innovator of many things, of reverb, of multi-track recording, solid body electric guitar. But his recording of this is nothing like the way I play it on a ukulele, which is something like a... His is probably a little more jazzy. Mine's a little more Hawaiian. What can I say? But I think hearing him play it just encouraged me to listen more Les Paul, to listen to more of that kind of music, and also to visualize that on a ukulele, which I have since, from hearing that recording, done many, many other pieces on ukulele that are similar to that. I think that era of music, though, is real important to me. I like that because those were actually, by today's standards, jazz. I don't know that people always considered them that back then because those were popular songs. I imagine it was wartime, though. I could only imagine Blue Skies, and in times like that, some of the greatest songs were written. That bands covered, like Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller, like the White Cliffs of Dover, that song that I have by Glenn Miller that just talks of, they don't come out and say it's wartime, but they say things like, there'll be bluebirds over the White Cliffs of Dover tomorrow, just wait and see. So it's always like a ray of hope. And so because of that, because of those emotions, and I think Blue Skies, the same things happen. People write great music because they wish and pray for the days when things become, better. And I think the result is, years later we forget all about that. We just have these great songs, and that style of music, if you chord that on guitar, you come up with some great voicings that you just don't get in a lot of music that I still love, say, for example, like the Hendrix stuff. You just don't get the kind of chords in that, So that's what I like about that kind of music.
Mm-hmm.